The Joe Rogan Experience.
So, your experience at Top Gear.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I've never really spoken about it because I keep my mouth shut. I like to remain dignified. It's quite a journey. It's come to an end now. I really feel it's a full stop. The show has been put on hold in the UK indefinitely is the terminology from the BBC. That means it's an end. But strangely, it exists in other formats around the world. So there's been an American one. There's one in Finland. There's one in Australia. There's one in France. So the license and the brand exists elsewhere, but not at its home in the UK. And it came to an end for me one day in December 2022 in a way that I'd like to say I hadn't expected, but I had. And I think that's the bit that I've found very difficult to deal with over the last couple of years. Fundamentally, I'm quite a happy-go-lucky person. I'm very privileged with the life I've had. And I love the fact that I earn a living doing what I love. You must have the same thing. To wake up,
sure.
What a joy. I don't push a desk. I get to wreck other people's tyres. And also my subject is one that is surrounded by joy. No one wants to hear. The last person you want to hear from is the miserable car road tester.
Right.
He can fuck off.
Yeah, he can fuck off.
You know, he can, and I don't want to be that guy.
I hate those guys.
Yeah, but actually, I'd be lying if I said I feel good today. I've had a good few months, but the last 18 months have been bad because I didn't know what to do. Because I'd like to sit here and say I never saw it coming, but I did.
So what happened?
The accident that my friend Andrew had, known as Fred, I won't go into too much because it's sort of out there what happened. He rolled a Morgan three-wheeler. He wasn't wearing a crash helmet. And if you do that, even at 25, 30 miles an hour, the injuries that you sustain are profound. I was there on the day. I was the only presenter with Fred that day. I wasn't actually right by him, but I was close by. I remember the radio message that I heard. I always used to have a radio in my little room at the test track where I was sitting inside so I could hear what was going on. And I heard someone say, there's been a real accident here. The car's upside down. So I ran to the window, looked out, and he wasn't moving. So I thought he was dead. I assumed he was. Then he moved. I can tell you now that unless he's a physical specimen, Fred. He's a big guy, 6'5", 6'6", strong. And if he wasn't so strong, he wouldn't have survived. He's a great advert for physical strength and conditioning. Because if he hadn't been that strong, he'd have just snapped his neck. He'd be dead. So I couldn't believe he survived. And that sort of that moment of realization that he'd survived has kind of defined my thoughts on the subject since. Because I believe that anything after that is a bit of a bonus. You know, he should be dead, really. And the fact that he survived it is remarkable, and it's given him and his family a chance to move on under very difficult circumstances. So that day was very difficult, made even more difficult by the fact that the build-up to that particular shoot, I knew that at the last minute, I knew we were using a Morgan three-wheeler. It's a difficult car. You know, the name tells you its physics is complicated. It doesn't mean it's inherently dangerous. You just drive it according to what it is. You have to be aware of its limitations. And I think that really was difficult. And you need experience. There were two people that had driven a Morgan three-wheeler before, present that day, me and someone else, a pro driver. And we were sitting inside at that time. No one had asked us anything about the car. They'd just gone on and shot it without us. And I think if I'm looking in the mirror, I find it very difficult, even now, that Andrew, who I love to bits, a lovely man, he was a pro cricket player. He wasn't an automotive guy. But he was a real enthusiast. He was great, much like you. He loved cars. And he would always come up to me before a shoot and say, tell me how it is. You know, I've got all the advice. Give me the last bit of advice on what I should do, what I should expect. And that was the first, because of the call times that day, that was the first time we'd never had the chance to talk about how he might approach a difficult vehicle. And that was the one day that it went wrong. I find that very difficult to live with. And I feel partly responsible because I didn't get the chance to talk to him. But my situation is nothing compared to his. Anyhow, the bit that I find really difficult is that in the aftermath of that accident, the show was put on hold. Andrew had to recover from frankly awful injuries and has done so, but profound injuries. We all kept quiet. We said nothing. And I said nothing because I wanted to look after him. It wasn't my story, was it? I was caught up in the collateral damage. I lost my job immediately because they cancelled the show and my contract was up. So suddenly I haven't got a job. But again, you look in the mirror and think, I'm alive. I've got 3 beautiful children. I'm not in Fred's position. Andrew and Fred are the same person. Sorry, that's his nickname. And I just sort of got my head down. But I had seen this coming. There was a big inquiry, a lot of soul searching. The BBC's good at that. But what was never spoken about was that 3 months before the accident, I'd gone to the BBC and said, unless you change something, someone's going to die on this show. So I went to them. I went to the BBC and I told them of my concerns from what I'd seen. As the most experienced driver on the show by a mile, I said, if we carry on, at the very least, we're going to have a serious injury. At the very worst, we're going to have a fatality.
Let's explain to people that aren't aware of what Top Gear is and how Top Gear works, because I know there's a lot of Americans that never watched the show. You guys do a lot of really crazy stunts with automobiles, not necessarily just cars, but big trucks and all kinds of crazy things, and some of them are quite ridiculous.
Yeah, there was a bit of a arms race between us and maybe the other big car show, the Grand Tour at the time, to go ever more stupid. And we did do some big stunts, and a lot of the time.
And the Grand Tour is the original cast of Top Gear, Jeremy
show.
Klops and Richard May.
In their Amazon show,
yeah.
Which sadly they've just ended. Great show. So, and also I'm
James May, right? Sorry.
Yeah. I'm not of the health and safety world. I'm not risk averse. I love a bit of risk, and I also absolutely believe that if you enter into a show like Top Gear, you know what you're taking on. You know,
right.
I believe that there is no such thing as great risk-free television like that. It's good. You just got to, I just turn up and I assess what I see and I do what I'm comfortable with, and I want to make great television. That's it. And if sometimes it got a bit sketchy, so be it. We've all done that. Right. That's the way the world lives. And I think what happened with Top Gear was I saw repeatedly, too many times, my 2 co-hosts who didn't have the experience I had in cars. This is the critical thing. I'm qualified to make those decisions because I've done it a long time. They weren't. One of them is an actor comedian. The other guy is a pro cricket player. Brilliant entertainers. They were great hosts. But their roles were to make people laugh, and my role was to tell people what cars were like. And all too often, in the last year, I saw situations where it got too dangerous. And it culminated actually in us being in Thailand. Myself and Paddy were in Thailand. And we did a go-kart race down a hill in just compacted mud on wooden go-karts with no engines. And I just looked at them and I said, this is just this. So it's not a question of whether we get injured, it's how injured we get. So just have an ambulance at the bottom because something's going to go wrong. Sure enough, I broke something in my hand, broke a finger or what have you. And I just thought, which sounds ridiculous from your background because you're super tough guys, but it hurt.
No, I don't want to break my fingers.
I didn't. And also, it was a shit piece of television. So I always said I don't mind breaking my hand if we get a BAFTA for it, or an award. But this was just the shit skit, and I ended up damaged, and it went on too much. So anyhow, I went to the BBC and I said, I want to have a meeting with the head of health and safety because this is not good. And what's really killed me is that no one's ever really acknowledged the fact that I called it beforehand, and it's very difficult to live with that initially for me. When I thought I'd done the right thing. I'm not very good at that. I normally just go with the flow. But I saw this coming. I thought I did the right thing. I went to the BBC. And I found out really that no one had taken me very seriously. I did a bit of digging afterwards. The conversation I had with those people was sort of acknowledged. Then they tried to sort of shut me down a bit. And then they didn't look after me at all. They just sort of left me to rot. And even now, I'm totally perplexed by the whole thing. It's to actually say to an organisation, this is going to go wrong, and then be there the day that it goes wrong, is a position I never expected to be in, and I never want to be in again. It's strange, and pretty heartbreaking in many ways. I loved that show.
So did the conversation between you and the network completely stop after the accident?
They just sort of left me to sweat, really. I just sat in where I live and drank whiskey. I didn't have much contact with them at all. Everything went quiet. They had 2 inquiries into the accident commissioned, neither of which I had access to. I pushed very hard to have access to the second one and saw some of it. And I had this, this is one of the most bizarre interactions I've had. I sat down with someone from the BBC who was going to talk me through bits of the second inquiry into the accident. And I'd already been told that I no longer had a job. So I'd been told that Top Gear was done. And at the beginning of it, he said to me, I won't name him, he said, "I want to thank you so much for taking part in this because it's really going to help us as an organisation going forwards." I said, well, it doesn't really help me. I've lost my job. And I'm always reminded of that old adage from a very brilliant BBC comedy show, which was never commission an inquiry that you don't know the outcome of in the first place. So the whole thing, the whole situation was ridiculous. And I've never told anyone that. I think, and I want to tell people that I did, because a bit of me thought, as the experienced driver, do members of the public think that I didn't do enough to protect Andrew? But and Paddy as well. They both experienced other incidents on that show that I think were unacceptable. And that's coming as someone who loves a bit of risk. If you and I went outside now and there were 2 quad bikes, I'd happily roll it for a laugh with you. I'm that guy. And even me as that guy thought it had gone too far, which I think is important to say.
Right. Well, that is the problem with those shows, is they always want to keep pushing the limit, and it's generally the producers who don't quite understand the limitations of the vehicles.
And they don't have the experience of what it's like to actually be in control of that vehicle or what is possible.
Right.
So all too often it's, can you just do that?
Right.
And then you want to be a crowd pleaser. You want to be the guy that can do it.
We had that on Fear Factor.
Yeah.
When I was hosting Fear Factor, there was a couple of times where I was like, what the fuck are we doing? Especially the second season. Like, Fear Factor started in 2001 and went to 2007, and then we came back again in 2011, and we only did 6 episodes. And they tried to make it just really ramped up. And when it was canceled, it was actually canceled because people had to drink donkey sperm. Yeah. Which was pretty minor. And it's disgusting, but it wasn't anything that was going to risk anyone's lives. But I was really feeling like, if this keeps going, the stunts are so spectacular and so big. We're launching cars through moving trains. There was a moving train, and then the train had all these like cardboard boxes in it. We launch a car off a ramp like sideways, and it goes through the train. You have to time it just right so you don't hit the car into one of the big metal...
And someone in the car?
Yeah, driving it, yeah. Oh, yeah.
My experience of that now is that if you establish really big stunts that have big vision and are ambitious, they tend to come with them a level of rigour that means they are executed well. The difficult area is the kind of just being at a test track with a smaller crew and someone says, give that a go. That's when it goes wrong, because no one's really thought about it. They're saying, "Well, we've done the risk assessment, but just give that a go while you're here." I think that goes wrong. And also, my experience, and this is where everyone that's shot with me will have been reminded of this now and again. Close of play, end of the day, that's when it goes wrong. If you're at a test track, it's just, the light's coming down. There's 10 minutes to go, and the director says, "Just do that." I go, "No," because everyone's tired. Someone's going to have ignored the lockdown on the circuit. There'll be someone coming driving the other way with the coffee cups over there. It's the end of the day.
Right.
If it's 6 o'clock, 5:30, I'm gone.
Right.
And not because I'm work shy. I'll stay around and pick stuff up.
Right.
But the end of the day when you start rushing. And I think there was an element of that day at Dunsfold. That was a shoot that was rushed for me. That was, and I know that was we need to use this day shoot. That's another one that's another red flag for me. We've got a day at a track, we need to fill it. Well, you've reverse engineered that,
Right.
Your priorities are already to fill something up.